the top stories on the hour. 2 killed after reported explosion on key bridge between Russia and Crimea. Magnitude 6.2 earthquake strikes Argentina. Fighting in Sudan leaves farmers struggling to get crops planted. Welcome to the World News on VOP TV. I am Kayla Abraham. Traffic on the key bridge connecting Crimea to Russia's mainland has been halted amid reports of explosions. The health ministry in Russia's Krasnodar region, which lies at the eastern end of the bridge, stated that 2 people were killed in an unspecified accident on the bridge and their daughter was injured. The governor of Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014, announced the closure of the bridge early on Monday, but did not specify the reason. News reports stated that local residents heard explosions before dawn, but there was no confirmation. The extent of the damage was not immediately clear, but Governor Sergei Aksyonov disclosed that he expected rail traffic on the bridge to resume within several hours. Still in Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin disclosed in an interview published on Sunday that Russia has a sufficient stockpile of cluster munitions and one that Russia reserves the right to take reciprocal actions if Ukraine uses the controversial weapons. In his first comment on the delivery of cluster munitions to Ukraine from the US, Putin stated that Russia has not used cluster bombs in its war in Ukraine so far. The Pentagon stated on Thursday that the cluster munitions provided by the United States had arrived in Ukraine. The munitions, which are bombs that open in the air and release scores of smaller bomblets, are seen by the U.S. as a way to get Kiev critically needed ammunition to help bolster its offensive and push through Russian front lines. U.S. leaders debated the thorny issue for months before President Joe Biden made the final decision last week. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military stated early on Monday that the Ukrainian forces are continuing their offensive in the Melitopol and Donetsk areas of the southern Zaporizhia region while recapturing some territory in the eastern region of Donetsk. Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Malaya stated in Telegram that over the past week, as a result of offensive actions in total, almost 18 square kilometers were liberated, adding that in the Bakhmut area of Donetsk, Ukrainian forces managed to recapture some territory. Malaya stated that the total amount of territory recaptured by Ukrainian troops since the start of their counter-offensive totals more than 210 square kilometers. Russian forces spearheaded by Wagner mercenaries took Bakhmut in May after months of heavy fighting, but Ukrainian troops have recently been making gains to the north and south of the devastated city. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine disclosed in its daily report early on Monday that Russian troops are concentrating their main military operations in the Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Kupiansk, and Marinka directions in Donetsk. And now a magnitude 6.6 earthquake struck deep in the earth under Argentina on Sunday and was felt in neighboring Chile, but authorities didn't report any damage. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, the quake occurred at a depth of 171 kilometers. The epicenter was in the province of Neuquén in western Argentina, 25 kilometers east-southeast of the town of Locompue. The earthquake was felt in the central and southern parts of neighboring Chile. Neither Argentinian nor Chilean authorities reported any damages. At least 40 people in South Korea died after a weekend of severe rains caused widespread flooding and landslides across the country. The disasters have prompted calls from President Yoon Suk-yeol to overhaul how the country combats extreme weather arising from climate change. On Monday, the nation was reeling from a tornado tragedy where at least 13 people died in their vehicles after becoming trapped by floodwaters. The full death toll is still unknown, but on Monday, responders were still working to drain the 685-meter-long tunnel in the central city of Cheonju, with divers deployed to retrieve victims. At least 15 vehicles, including a bus, were trapped in the underpass on Saturday when floodwater from a nearby burst riverbank poured in. 9 survivors have been found so far. Meanwhile, families of those missing have been waiting anxiously for information at a local hospital. Elsewhere, at least 19 people died in the mountainous North Gyeongsang region in central South Korea after landslides swept away whole houses. Some 6,400 residents were evacuated early on Saturday after the Gosan Dam in North Chuncheon began to overflow. A number of low-lying villages near the dam as well as many of the roads connecting them were submerged, leaving some residents trapped in their homes. Similarly, heavy rains pounded an already saturated northeast on Sunday for the second time in a week, spurring another round of flash flooding, cancelled flights, and power outages. In Pennsylvania, a sudden flash flood late on Saturday afternoon claimed at least 4 lives. Officials in Bucks County, Upper Makefield Township in Pennsylvania, disclosed that torrential rains occurred around 5:30 p.m. on Saturday in the Washington Crescent area, sweeping away several cars. Authorities disclosed that at least 4 people died and 3 others, including a 9-month-old boy and a 2-year-old girl, remained missing. Other parts of the East Coast were experiencing heavy rain, including Vermont. Authorities there stated that landslides could become a problem on Sunday as the state copes with more rain following days of flooding. Now, the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen stated on Monday that the United States is working with India to develop an investment platform to lower the cost of capital and increase private investments to fast-track India's energy transition. After a bilateral meeting with India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on the sidelines of a G20 meeting, Yellen disclosed that the two nations have been collaborating across a range of economic issues, including commercial and technological collaborations and strengthening supply chains. The visit is Yellen's third to India this year, indicating the growing closeness between the two countries. The improvements in bilateral relations was highlighted during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Washington last month, which saw a slew of defense and high-technology deals being signed. Yellen also stated that the two countries are close to reaching an agreement on the global minimum tax system. Meanwhile, U.S. climate envoy John Kerry disclosed that it was imperative that China and the United States make real progress in the 4 months before the COP28 global climate talks in Dubai as he met his counterpart Xi Jinping in the Chinese capital on Monday. He also urged China to partner with the United States to cut methane emissions and reduce the climate impact of coal-fired power, with the two sides aiming to rebuild trust following a suspension in talks last year. As delegates representing the world's top 2 greenhouse gas emitters gathered in a conference room overlooking Beijing's Forbidden City on Monday morning, Xi stated that the two climate envoys could play a role in improving U.S.-China relations. Both China and the United States have experienced months of record-breaking heat and extreme weather. This week's meetings, which will continue until Wednesday, will have no formal schedule but are expected to focus on the abatement of methane and other non-CO2 emissions, as well as the run-up to COP28. Now, Army Chief Alphonse Maes disclosed to reporters that Germany is confident it will have the best-equipped army division amongst the European NATO allies in 2025 as countries are scrambling to gear up their troops in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At the moment, Berlin does not have a single combat-ready division, a military unit comprising more than 20,000 troops. It aims to have the first of 3 divisions operational by 2025, with the second to follow in 2027. The Lieutenant General stated that Germany would provide 2 mechanized brigades first, a more lightly armed medium brigade later, and be reinforced by a Dutch brigade. A brigade has some 5,000 troops. Divisions are the land forces' main organizational building blocks that would be needed to handle a conflict with a peer adversary. Western nations are scrambling to rebuild and re-equip their divisions after decades spent fighting smaller wars in Iraq or Afghanistan saw them neglected, taken apart and stripped of weapons and ammunition. Finally, a war between military factions in Sudan is putting at risk the production of staple crops this year. Farmers in several states disclosed threatening to drive the African nation deeper into hunger and poverty. Reporters spoke to more than a dozen people, including farmers, experts, and aid workers who reported delays in planting crops such as sorghum and millet, partly due to a lack of credit from banks and the high prices of key inputs such as fertilizers, seeds, and fuel. Some farmers that were spoken to stated that they may not be able to plant at all before heavy rains expected this month, which is a traditional window for planting. The worsening condition for farmers suggests a looming hunger crisis could be even worse than the UN and aid workers have forecast. In May, the United Nations stated that it estimated that the number of people going hungry in Sudan will rise to 19.1 million by August, from 16.2 million prior to the conflict, which started in April. Shortages of key staples exacerbated by looting of warehouses in cities like the capital Khartoum would further worsen a hunger crisis that has been steadily building in recent years. It could also cripple livelihoods and deprive Sudan of foreign currency needed to import basic commodities such as cash crops such as sesame and peanuts accounted for $1.6 billion in export. And that is a wrap on the world news on VOP TV. I am Kayla Abraham, VOP Business, coming up next.